Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important seminar. And today I'm going to be talking about surrogacy policy in India and its implication. It's a new change in India that just happened. And there is a Surrogacy Regulation Act that has just been passed at the Parliament. And it was a bill earlier, and now it's become an act. So basically, commercial surrogacy has been prohibited in India. So anybody going to India for surrogacy from abroad cannot do surrogacy anymore. So that part of the surrogacy is completely prohibited because commercial surrogacy has been prohibited. Now, the Union Ministry of Health, Harshvardhan, he's the one who has, he had a entire discussion on this because there was a lot of people who were opposing this ban or prohibition on commercial surrogacy. So he had sessions where he sat and met so many experts, and I was one of them that he invited to give inputs on the surrogacy regulation bill. And he said that he was saying that surrogacy was a thriving, unregulated industry in India, which was posing a threat to poor and disenfranchised women, and who were compelled to become surrogacy mothers, basically to battle poverty. Now, what he was saying is absolutely right, because what I experienced in my field, so I have done one study in 2009, and I did another study in 2019, a follow-up study. And I realized that most of the surrogate mothers that I met, almost all, they were in it because of poverty. They were in it for money. And this was making them vulnerable because these are the women who are poor women. They have lower education. And because they had lower education, they have lesser employment opportunities and lesser inadequate employment protection. Okay. So that was making their bargaining power in the surrogacy process very, very low. Plus, there was also stories about some of the women who were made to do surrogacy just for buying two buffaloes or buying just an extra piece of land. So it was going beyond imagination how women were expected to go through this process just to buy a piece of land, extra piece of land, or a few buffaloes. And because they were, they had a lower educational status, these are the girls who are actually pulled out from schools. They're pulled out from schools into early marriage and their early childbirth. And because they are poor, their their basic health is very, it's of a substandard state, because their nutrition, their health condition, this makes them much more vulnerable to, is making them much more vulnerable to maternal mortality and morbidity. And they were in it for money. So this is a process. This lady in a yellow sari was saying that this process is so distressing that if I had money, I would not do it even if somebody had given me 10 times the money. But now I'm so desperate for the money that I would do it even for a 1/3 amount of money of payment. So this was the extent of motivation, monetary motivation that people were doing surrogacy for. Altruistic surrogacy is presently allowed in India. Now, initially, what some of the ministers were saying that some women are willing to become surrogate mothers, and hence we are allowing altruistic surrogacy. But as we know, deaths of surrogacy is not reported as much. Okay, these are unreported. There's so many unreported maternal mortalities because of surrogacy. And in this particular case, this is one of the tip of an iceberg, because one particular woman, she died. Her name was Ranjita Lal in 2014. She died out of altruistic surrogacy. So she was coerced to do surrogacy for her elder sister-in-law. She already had a surrogacy. I mean, she already had a child of her own. And she was forced to do surrogacy for her sister-in-law. This is a second childbirth. But what had happened is the doctors had told her that you should not go into another pregnancy because you have a cardiac problem, you have a heart problem. But she was coerced into surrogacy and she apparently died during the surrogacy. So my question is that deaths will happen, and this is a high risk pregnancy. We all know that surrogacy pregnancy are of a much higher risk than normal pregnancies. In that case, and if you take this particular case where this woman had died, she was also a victim of dowry abuse. So she was from a poorer family, and hence from within the family, she was forced to do surrogacy for her elder daughter-in-law who was probably richer than her. So what does the act do to provide any kind of safeguard for such women? Because these women are still vulnerable. And this is, as I've always said before also, it is a form of patriarchy, and patriarchy is like very, very embedded and very strong holding. There's a very strong holding of patriarchy in India. Now, in this particular case, she has been forced to do surrogacy and she died. So what are the safeguard that the act can provide for such women? Secondly, it is death. Surrogate mother's death is just a tip of an iceberg. What about all the health problems that women face? So I did my second impact assessment study, and I found that most of the women said that they cannot do work as they used to do before post surrogacy. So it had reduced their capacity to do normal work than what they used to do before. So their earning capacity had gone down. Their sustainable income that was there had gone down because they cannot go back to the work they were doing before. So these are poor women who were maid servants, working as maids in other people's houses. This was really physical work they were doing, but they cannot do that work anymore because their health has been affected badly. Now, this is the same in altruistic surrogacy or in commercial surrogacy. So what is a safeguard? Their health is still, these women's health is still vulnerable. Now, what does this altruistic surrogacy include? According to the Surrogacy Act in India, it includes no charges that should be given to the surrogate mother, no expenses, no fees, no remuneration or monetary incentive of whatever nature. This is what it doesn't include. Now, what it includes is medical expenses, all prescribed expenses on the surrogate mother. It includes an insurance coverage of 36 months. And these are given to the surrogate mother or to her dependents or her representative. But this doesn't include loss of work. For example, women who might not be able to go back to the work that they used to do before, that is not included in this expenses. Now, one of the questions that I would ask is, can poor people afford this medical expenses? Does this bill or does this act then cater to only the rich people? So again, it reiterates classism in the society. So that is one thing that I wanted to say. Who can avail surrogacy? So the intended couples are those who have a medical indication necessitating gestational surrogacy and who intend to become parents through surrogacy. Now, earlier, there was a clause that they have to wait for several years and so on, but that clause has been removed. Now, another thing I wanted to say in the previous slide is that surrogate mothers, earlier it was said that anybody can become surrogate, it was only for relatives. Only relatives can become surrogate mother. But now they have lifted that clause and anybody can become surrogate mother. So that is one clause that has been lifted than what it was earlier. Among the intended parents, they have to show a certificate that they can they have not been able to have children through a normal process. They also have to show a certificate that they have not been able to adopt a child, which is again my input into the Rajya Sabha bill. It is not going to be very easy to do surrogacy in India. So, and I'm quite happy that they included that clause, because I sat at the Parliament House and said that it should not be made easy. So it should not be that anybody can get up, and because at some point I realized that they're not going to ban surrogacy completely. They're going to allow altruistic surrogacy. So my intention was to make it more and more difficult so that it's not easily available to intended couples. So they have included one clause, which is they should show that they have not been able to adopt a child, and they have not been, they tried IVF and it has not worked on themselves. It is only then they can avail surrogacy. Now, other things that has been included in the Surrogacy Act recently is that NRIs have been allowed. Earlier, NRIs, when the draft bill came in 2015, NRIs, non-resident Indians, were not allowed to do surrogacy. And at that point of time, UK citizens were the highest number of clients coming into India for doing surrogacy, intended parents coming into India for surrogacy. There were many people from UK. Now, I was also against that people coming, NRIs coming from abroad, coming and doing surrogacy and taking back the child, it is almost as much traumatic for the surrogate mothers as it is for people coming from abroad. I'm not saying that within the country it is less traumatic, but this should have been curbed, but that has not been curbed. So it actually reiterates classism again, the same thing. So this is one of the loophole and one of the disadvantages I see in the Surrogacy Act that is there. One very interesting thing has been included, who can avail surrogacy, not allowed surrogacy, who can avail surrogacy. It is intended woman. So a widow or a divorcee has been allowed to avail surrogacy in India from between the age group 35 and 45. Now, I very strongly feel that this is reinforcing patriarchal stereotypes of motherhood. So this is a clause that was not there before. And in the course of discussions of the about the bill, this has been added, and widows have been allowed. And I have a very strong contention that widows in the family might be coerced to sign a surrogacy contract, because there is a punishment now. There is a punishment not only of fine, but also for jailing. You have to there is a punishment for imprisonment for 5 years, or for even more, 10 years for second offense. So I have a very strong feeling that this is putting women who are widows in families, making them vulnerable and putting their life at risk by inclusion of this particular clause. And divorcees have also been included, and this is also for people whose husband dies. So there might be families who might force these widows to actually go for a surrogacy after their husband has died. So those kind of clauses, which I find is very, very problematic. And I would like to quote Janice Raymond's, from her book, Women as Wombs. Women feel pressured to try these technologies simply because it exists. So these are, by adding this intended woman as one of the kind of individuals who can access surrogacy, it is reinforcing this pressure that women have to use the technology. And the words that are given by the society, people are told, have you thought about adoption or IVF or surrogacy, as though simply getting a child somehow will solve the entire problem of childlessness. But it's from a feminist perspective, it is a very inbuilt patriarchy that plays into the what defines motherhood, and why there's a pressure on women to become a mother. So who can be a surrogate mother? Earlier, as I told you, there is a discussion about allowing relatives to become surrogacy, but now there's a restriction on that. That restriction has been lifted. So right now, surrogate mothers means a woman who agrees to bear a child through surrogacy for implantation of embryo into her womb, and she has to give back that child at the end of the surrogacy. So she's not allowed traditional surrogacy. It is a gestational surrogacy. So married women having her own child of age 25 to 35, and she can be a surrogate mother only once. So this is the clause that are there in the Surrogacy Act. But these are things that are that will be very, very difficult to, what is the English word? To regulate. It will be very difficult to regulate this. How many times a surrogate mother is, a woman is becoming a surrogate mother. Of course, the Act also says that there's going to be a surrogacy board. So we have to wait and see how effective those boards are and whether they will be registering these surrogate mothers effectively. Punishment, there is a punishment for this. First offense is imprisonment for a term of 5 years and fine of 5 lakhs. And the second offense is imprisonment for 10 years and fine of 10 lakhs. Now, this again, as I had told earlier, because there are widows involved, I have a very strong concern that this might be putting widows and divorcees into problems. Now, the previous concerns like exploitation of women who are detained in surrogate homes, this has not been addressed at all in the new Surrogacy Act. So whether these women will be retained in homes, whether they will have restrictions of movement, food, all that problems that were there earlier. They were asked to breastfeed. Some surrogate mothers were asked to breastfeed their the babies after birth. Some were asked to do nanny care, give nanny care, and this was going on until a few months after surrogacy. So we do not know, and this particular clause has not been addressed at all in the new Act. And in my follow-up study, I also had seen women being chosen for their fair skin. So this particular woman in my follow-up study was chosen to be a surrogate mother only because she had a fairer skin. So how far can such a bill, such an act that allows altruistic surrogacy curb something like this form of racism that is there in the surrogacy markets? Sex selective abortions was rampant that I found in the 2019 follow-up study. So there was this lady in this green dress standing next to me, and she was selective, in utero selective abortions was done on her, and in the process she lost all her babies because there's a risk that is involved in that procedure. And selectively they had aborted one girl child that she had. She was carrying 2 boys and a girl, and that girl child had been aborted in utero, and this happened in 2019, and that's not very far away. The lady in the black, she was also asked to abort. She was carrying 2 children and she was asked to abort 1 child because that was not the sex that the intended parents wanted to have. So according to the ART bill, Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill, so there were 2 acts that were passed simultaneously. One is the Assisted Reproductive Technology Act and one is the Surrogacy Regulation Act. According to the ART Act, it clearly says that pre-implantation genetic diagnostics, sex determination, sex selective abortion will be prohibited as it is in the Indian law, but as it is in the PCPNDT Act, but Prenatal Diagnostics Testing Act. But how far can this be controlled? Because IVF technology is used sometimes specifically only for sex selective abortions. So it's very difficult to regulate and try to, control this kind of sex determination and sex selective abortions that is going on inside the laboratories, in the clinics. So this is one a kind of dangerous loophole that is there in the entire ART program, and specifically because surrogacy is allowed. It's very difficult to control whether this is happening in the altruistic surrogacy. I would like to address one of the assumptions that people commonly bring out, is assumption that now that the commercial surrogacy is banned, this is going to go underground. And from my experience, when I had gone in 2019, 2015 bill was already on the table. So we all knew that this is coming up, and the clinics were already in a slump. The entire market was in a slump. This is my own experience at what I have seen. Neither the doctors nor the surrogate mothers were willing to indulge in any kind of illegal surrogacy. And 60% of the surrogacies at that point of time, 60% is a huge proportion. 60% of the surrogacies that was being commissioned in Anand and Ahmedabad was from abroad, intended parents coming from abroad. And women themselves have realized. So this was an area, Anand is an area where this initial hub. So this area is a place where surrogacy started very early in 2005. Surrogacy had started mushrooming in this area in a big way. And when I went in 2019, what I observed was surrogate mothers themselves had realized that this was causing a great deal of health risk. It was causing a great deal of health risk on their bodies. And they realized that it was not worth the money that was coming in. So many women themselves had started telling me that we did a mistake by doing this. It has actually destroyed our health and well-being. So that realization was there among surrogate mothers. And see, this was all a market. So people know that the dollars and euros have stopped coming in. So that interest that was there in the transnational, commercial surrogacy, it was going on. That kind of interest is not there anymore, because what was happening was a big international transnational market that was going on there. That has slumped down in a big way. I would like to bring analogies with sex selective abortion, because we have also a ban on sex determination and sex selective abortions. Earlier, before the prohibition of sex selection, there were 50 doctors who were doing it. Now there are only 5 doctors who may be doing it. So it is reduced to a great extent, and that is similarly what has happened to the surrogate. There might be people, because altruistic surrogacy is allowed, certainly there will be people who would do it, but not to the extent that was happening earlier. And also the exploitation that was happening, the extent of exploitation that was happening earlier will not happen now, because earlier women were being trafficked into surrogacy from surrounding areas of Delhi along the Gangetic Plain. This is the traditional areas where women were being trafficked for working as housemaids and as prostitution. In big cities, surrogacy was just an activity that got added to that chain of networks. Now, this sort of activity will not happen because people do not want to indulge into illegal activities, and since there is imprisonment and fine as well, people would not want to indulge in this kind of trafficking, because there is money involved, but not big money involved. So that is what they are looking at it from a business perspective. So, for example, this lady said they treated me like a money minting machine. My will never mattered to them. All they wanted was to deliver babies, and they were raped and enslaved and traded, and then their babies were sold. So that extent of activities was going on. This will certainly be curbed with the new surrogacy bill, as what I strongly have observed. Because when I went for doing my impact assessment study, already there was a slump because they knew the commercial surrogacy is going to be banned soon. The bill was already there. That means when the bill is there, that means it's almost implemented. So I would like to end my talk by saying that, coming back to the point that it is a reproductive injustice. Surrogacy itself is a reproductive injustice, and hence it should not be allowed. And as I've written in my book as well, women who face infertility, we know that women are facing double burden of infertility. So they carry the burden not only of themselves, but also of their the male counterparts. So 1/3 of women are infertile because of male factor, 1/3 is because of female factor, and women are carrying the entire burden because all the treatment happens in their bodies. It's IVF treatment and all kind of correction, so-called, is conducted on their body. That's what it happens. So they face social stigma, they face psychological problems, physical stress because of the infertility treatment, because of repeated trials and the hormone injections and medicines impacts also their psychological health, because they also they face depression. Depression is one of the results of this IVF treatments. Hence, there is a violation of their bodily integrity. But by taking up surrogacy as an activity, they are putting other women through the same set of problems, the social stigma, psychological challenges, violation of her bodily integrity, but they're also putting additional risk on the surrogate mothers, on her health, on her freedom, on her liberty, and even on her health, on her life, which is at stake. And hence, I strongly think that altruistic surrogacy also should be completely shut down in India. And it is only then that women who get exploited and coerced into surrogacy using the name of altruism can actually come up and register their cases, because otherwise they will not be able to come up and register their cases to register that this is an injustice against their bodily integrity. So thank you very much for listening to me.